The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on White Rock, Arizona, as Willow Garrett clutched her twins to her chest, tears streaming down her dust-covered face, unaware that Nathan Keller, the notorious bounty hunter who had been tracking her for 3 weeks, stood in the shadow of the barn, listening to every word she whispered to her 6-month-old babies. It was 1878, and the unforgiving frontier had taken nearly everything from Willow. At 24, she had already endured more heartache than most people faced in a lifetime. Her husband, Thomas, had been gunned down by outlaws 8 months prior, leaving her alone and pregnant in a town that had little sympathy for a woman without means. When the twins, Eliza and James, arrived 2 months after Thomas's death, Willow had been certain they wouldn't survive the winter. "I don't know how much longer we can stay here, my little ones," she whispered, rocking them gently in the hayloft where she'd taken shelter. "Your mama's running out of options. That awful Mr. Prescott says I owe him money. Thomas borrowed, but I know your daddy would never—" Her voice broke. "He's lying, trying to force me to sell the land. But this is your birthright, the only thing I have left to give you." Nathan's hand instinctively moved to the warrant in his pocket. Harrison Prescott, the wealthiest man in the Arizona Territory, had hired him to bring in Willow Garrett on charges of theft. Supposedly she had stolen cash and valuables before fleeing her previous lodgings. The bounty was substantial, $500, enough to buy the small ranch in Colorado that Nathan had been saving for over the past 5 years. He'd been about to make his move when he noticed the small bundles in her arms. Babies. The warrant hadn't mentioned children. "I promise you both," Willow continued softly, unaware of his presence, "I will find us a place where we can be safe, where you can grow up strong and good like your father. We just have to make it to my cousin's place in California." Nathan shifted his weight, causing a floorboard to creak beneath his boot. Willow's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear as she clutched her children tighter. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror evident on her face. Nathan stepped into view, keeping his hands visible. His 6'3" frame and broad shoulders typically intimidated those he pursued, but he deliberately softened his stance. "Madam," he said, removing his hat. "Nathan Keller." Willow moved with surprising speed, positioning herself between her babies and the stranger. "What do you want? We have nothing of value." Nathan studied her face. Despite the dirt and exhaustion, he could see she was beautiful. Honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical braid, eyes the color of a summer storm, and a determined set to her jaw that spoke of a strength that belied her slender frame. "I've been sent to bring you back to White Rock," he said honestly. "Harrison Prescott has filed charges against you." The color drained from Willow's face. "That man is a liar and a thief. I've stolen nothing." One of the babies began to fuss, and she instinctively reached back to soothe the child without taking her eyes off Nathan. "He's trying to steal my husband's land. Land that rightfully belongs to my children now." Nathan had heard similar protestations of innocence countless times before. Few were genuine, yet something in the way she protectively shielded her children gave him pause. "Those are your babies?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "My twins, 6 months old." Her voice softened despite her fear. "James and Eliza." Nathan took a step closer, and Willow tensed, but instead of reaching for his weapon, he peered at the infants. 2 identical pairs of blue eyes stared back at him with innocent curiosity. The little boy reached out a chubby hand, grasping at nothing in particular, while his sister observed Nathan with what appeared to be serious contemplation. "Seems they've claimed you already," Nathan said, his voice gentler than he'd intended. Willow's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Nathan gestured toward the babies. "The boy there, he's reaching for me like I'm an old friend, and the girl's looking at me like she's measuring my worth." He found himself smiling slightly. "Smart little things." A moment of silence hung between them, broken only by the soft cooing of the twins. "Are you going to take me back?" Willow finally asked, her voice barely audible. Nathan studied her face, then looked again at the twins. In his 15 years as a bounty hunter, he'd developed an instinct about people. Something about Harrison Prescott had struck him as dishonest from their first meeting, but the money had been too good to pass up. Now, faced with this young mother and her children, doubt crept in. "Tell me your side," he said, settling onto a hay bale a respectful distance away. "All of it." Willow hesitated, clearly weighing whether to trust him. Finally, necessity overcame caution. "My husband Thomas inherited 100 acres from his father," she began. "Good land with water rights. Harrison Prescott has been trying to buy it for years to expand his cattle operation. When Thomas refused to sell, Prescott started making trouble for us, diverting water, threatening our workers." She gently repositioned the babies. "After Thomas was killed, supposedly by bandits, Prescott claimed Thomas had borrowed money and used the land as collateral. He produced a document with Thomas's signature, but it's forged. My husband couldn't even write his own name I was teaching him." Nathan considered this information. Forged documents weren't uncommon in property disputes, and a widow with infant twins made an easy target. "Why did you run? If what you're saying is true, why not fight it in court?" Willow's bitter laugh held no humor. "The judge is Prescott's brother-in-law. I tried to contest it and woke up the next morning to find my house burning. We barely escaped with our lives." Her eyes hardened. "That's when he accused me of theft, claiming I'd stolen items from the very house he burned down. I had no choice but to flee." One of the twins, the boy, James, began to cry in earnest. Willow expertly shifted both babies, trying to soothe him. "He's hungry," she explained, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "They both are." Nathan stood, suddenly uncomfortable with the intimacy of the moment. "I'll step outside while you tend to them. And then you'll take us back?" The resignation in her voice stirred something in him. He paused at the ladder. "I haven't decided yet." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the abandoned farmyard. Nathan leaned against the weathered barn, wrestling with his conscience. The $500 would complete his savings, allowing him to finally settle down after years of tracking wanted men across the frontier. But the thought of delivering this young mother and her twins to a corrupt businessman turned his stomach. Inside the barn, Willow finished feeding her babies and gently laid them on a makeshift bed of hay covered with her shawl. They were good babies, rarely crying unless truly uncomfortable. She wondered if that was because they sensed her need for silence during their escape, or if it was simply their nature. "Your daddy would be so proud of you both," she whispered, running a finger along each tiny cheek. "So very proud." She heard footsteps approaching and quickly arranged her clothing, preparing herself for whatever Nathan Keller decided. When he climbed back into the loft, his expression was unreadable. "They're asleep?" he asked, his voice deliberately low. Willow nodded. "For now." Nathan knelt beside the makeshift pallet, studying the sleeping infants. Their peaceful faces, nearly identical but for the slightly longer eyelashes on the girl, stirred something long dormant within him. "I was a twin," he said suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. "My brother died when we were 4. Fever." Willow's expression softened. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." Nathan straightened up. "I need to ask you something, Mrs. Garrett. If I were to let you go, where would you go?" "Truly." Hope flickered briefly in Willow's eyes before caution extinguished it. "Why would you ask that?" "Just answer the question." Willow gathered her courage. "My cousin runs a small farm outside Sacramento. She's written offering us sanctuary, but it's a long journey, and I have little money." Nathan paced the small loft, his mind racing. He'd spent years upholding the law, or at least the letter of it. His reputation for always bringing in his quarry was what kept him employed in an increasingly civilized West. But this situation felt wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. "I need to think," he said finally. "We'll stay here tonight. I won't separate you from your children, but don't try running. I'm a light sleeper." Relief flooded Willow's features. "Thank you for not taking us back immediately." Nathan merely nodded, then descended the ladder to retrieve his saddlebags from his horse. When he returned, he offered her some dried beef and hardtack from his provisions. "It's not much," he apologized. "It's more than I've had since yesterday morning," Willow admitted, accepting the food gratefully. "The twins take what little strength I have." As night fell, the temperature dropped rapidly, typical of desert regions. Willow curled around her babies for warmth, while Nathan settled against the far wall of the loft, his blanket wrapped around his shoulders. In the pale moonlight filtering through cracks in the roof, Nathan watched as Willow drifted into exhausted sleep, her body protectively curved around her children even in slumber. He thought about his own lonely existence, 15 years of wandering from town to town, tracking outlaws and delivering justice that sometimes felt hollow. He was 34 years old, with nothing to show for it, but a reputation and a saddlebag of possessions. No home, no family, just the promise of enough money to finally stop running. The night passed slowly. Twice Nathan heard the babies stir, and each time Willow automatically responded, feeding or soothing them without fully waking. By morning, his decision was made. Willow awoke to find Nathan already up, his saddlebags packed. Fear clutched at her heart. He was going to take them back to White Rock after all. "Mrs. Garrett," he said formally, "I've given this considerable thought." She sat up, preparing herself for the worst. "Yes? I'm not taking you back to Prescott." The words hung in the air between them. Willow stared at him in disbelief. "You're letting us go?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. Nathan shook his head. "No, I'm taking you to Sacramento." Willow's mouth opened in shock. "But why?" Nathan's weathered face remained impassive. "Because Prescott is lying, and I won't be party to injustice against a mother and her children." Tears welled in Willow's eyes. "I can't pay you." "I'm not asking for payment." Nathan knelt to gather the few belongings she had scattered around the loft. "But Sacramento is nearly 1,000 miles from here. You'll never make it alone with 2 infants." Willow looked down at her sleeping babies, considering his offer. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," he answered honestly, "but consider the alternatives." She had no good response to that. Her options were desperately limited: return to White Rock and certain imprisonment, possibly losing her children in the process, or trust this stranger who was offering help when no one else would. "Why would you do this?" she pressed. "You're giving up a substantial bounty." Nathan was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Let's just say I'm trusting my instincts for once, rather than just following orders." 3 hours later, they were riding west. Nathan had purchased a small wagon from a farm 10 miles down the road, using a significant portion of his savings. Willow sat in the wagon bed with the twins, protected from the sun by a canvas cover he had rigged. His stallion, Samson, pulled the wagon steadily, while his pack mule, Delilah, followed behind. "We'll need to be careful," Nathan explained as they traveled. "Prescott might send others after you when I don't return." Willow nodded, adjusting her bonnet to better shield her face. "How long will it take to reach Sacramento?" "At least a month, maybe longer with the babies. We'll need to make frequent stops." The first week of travel was tense. Willow remained wary of Nathan despite his act of mercy, keeping conversation minimal and focused on practical matters. Nathan respected her caution, maintaining a professional distance while providing for their basic needs. They established a routine, traveling from dawn until midday, stopping during the hottest hours to rest, then continuing until dusk. Nathan hunted for fresh meat when possible and purchased supplies when they passed through small settlements. At night, they made camp away from the trail, with Willow and the twins sleeping in the wagon while Nathan kept watch from the ground nearby. It was during the second week that things began to change. They had stopped near a small creek to water the horses and rest during the midday heat when little Eliza developed a fever. "She's burning up," Willow said, panic edging her voice as she held her daughter's flushed body. Nathan immediately dampened a cloth in the cool creek water. "Let me see her." Willow hesitated only briefly, before placing the whimpering infant in his large, calloused hands. Nathan gently laid the cool cloth on Eliza's forehead, then checked her tiny limbs and torso. "No rash," he noted. "That's good. Could be just a simple fever from the heat." He looked up at Willow's worried face. "I've seen my share of trail sickness. Let's keep her cool and see if it breaks by evening." Throughout the afternoon, Nathan helped Willow bathe Eliza with cool water, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he supported the infant's head. By sunset, the fever had broken, and Eliza was sleeping peacefully. "Thank you," Willow said softly as they sat by the small campfire. James was asleep in a basket beside her, while she held Eliza close. "You're good with children for a man who tracks outlaws for a living." Nathan poked at the fire with a stick. "My mother was a midwife. I grew up around babies." He glanced at the sleeping twins. "They're good children, strong." "They have to be," Willow replied. "I worry about the kind of life I can give them." "A mother alone in this world doesn't have many prospects." "You're doing what you can," Nathan said. "That's all anyone can ask." Willow studied his face in the firelight. For the first time, she truly looked at him not as a bounty hunter or a threat, but as a man. His features were rugged, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' growth of beard. His eyes, a deep brown that appeared almost black in the dim light, held a quiet intelligence. A scar ran along his right cheekbone, and his dark hair curled slightly where it touched his collar. "May I ask you something personal, Mr. Keller?" "Nathan," he corrected. "And yes." "Why did you become a bounty hunter?" Nathan was silent for so long that Willow thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured. "I was a Union soldier during the war. After, I had no family to return to. My parents died while I was fighting. I drifted for a while, then fell in with a U.S. Marshal who taught me the trade. Turned out I had a knack for tracking." He shrugged. "It was supposed to be temporary, just until I saved enough for land of my own." "But it became your life," Willow observed. 15 years of temporary," he agreed with a wry smile. "What about you? How did you end up in Arizona territory?" Willow adjusted Eliza in her arms. "I came west with my family when I was 16. My father was chasing silver dreams that never materialized. He and my mother died of typhoid in a mining camp near Tucson. Thomas was working at the same camp he offered to marry me when I had nowhere else to go." She smiled sadly. "It wasn't a love match at first, but we grew fond of each other over time." "He was a good man?" "The best I've known," she affirmed. "Hard-working, honest. He was so excited about the babies. Started building a cradle the day I told him I was expecting." Her voice caught. "He never got to meet them." Nathan watched as she blinked back tears. "I'm sorry for your loss." "It still doesn't feel real sometimes," she admitted. "I keep expecting him to walk through the door, covered in dust from the fields, asking what's for supper." They fell into companionable silence, the crackling fire and distant night sounds of the desert the only noise around them. After a while, Willow began to hum softly, a lullaby that made Nathan think of his own mother, gone these 20 years. As the days passed, the initial wariness between them gradually dissolved. Nathan found himself looking forward to their evening conversations after the twins were asleep. Willow's quiet strength and unwavering devotion to her children impressed him more than any display of bravado he'd witnessed in saloons and frontier towns. For her part, Willow began to see beyond Nathan's intimidating exterior to the thoughtful, principled man beneath. She noticed how he always took the most difficult tasks upon himself, how he ensured she and the twins had the best portions of their meals, and how his eyes softened when he looked at the babies. 3 weeks into their journey, they encountered their first serious trouble. They had stopped in a small town called Bitter Springs to replenish supplies, when Nathan noticed 2 rough-looking men watching them from the boardwalk. "Get back to the wagon," he told Willow quietly as they exited the general store. "Don't look around, just walk normally." Willow clutched James tighter to her chest, while Eliza was secured in a sling across her torso. "What's wrong?" "We're being watched. Could be nothing, could be trouble." They made it back to the wagon without incident, but as Nathan helped Willow and the twins into the back, the men approached. "You Nathan Keller?" the taller of the two asked, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. Nathan turned slowly. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Bryce. This here's Lester." The man jerked his thumb toward his companion. "Harrison Prescott sends his regards. Says you took something that belongs to him." Nathan positioned himself between the men and the wagon. "I don't know what you're talking about." Bryce spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Sure you do. The Widow Garrett and her brats. Prescott's offering $700 now, 4 for the woman, 3 for you." His eyes narrowed. Dead or alive? Nathan's expression remained neutral, though his mind raced through options. "Seems Prescott's desperate." "Mighty desperate," Lester agreed with a yellow-toothed grin. "So what's it going to be, Keller? You hand her over and walk away, or we do this the hard way?" In the wagon, Willow heard every word. Fear clutched at her heart as she realized the danger they were in. Nathan had given up a substantial bounty to help her. Would he now be tempted by an even larger sum? And even if he wasn't, could he handle 2 armed men alone? She carefully placed the twins in their basket and reached for the rifle Nathan had given her for protection. If it came to a fight, she wouldn't let him face it alone. Outside, Nathan shifted his weight subtly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The lady traveling with me is my wife. We're headed to California to start fresh." Bryce laughed. "Nice try, Keller. Prescott described her real good, said she's got twins, boy and girl." He peered around Nathan toward the wagon. "We know it's her." "Then you know I can't let you take her," Nathan said, his voice dropping dangerously low. "That's a shame," Bryce replied, his hand moving to his gun. What happened next unfolded in seconds. As Bryce drew, Nathan launched himself forward, tackling the man before his weapon cleared the holster. They crashed to the ground in a cloud of dust. Lester reached for his own gun, but froze at the sound of a rifle being cocked. "Don't," Willow warned from the wagon, the barrel of the rifle steady despite her racing heart. On the ground, Nathan and Bryce grappled fiercely. Despite Bryce's larger size, Nathan fought with the desperate intensity of a man protecting something precious. He landed a solid punch to Bryce's jaw, momentarily stunning him, then scrambled for the fallen pistol. Lester, seeing his partner in trouble, ignored Willow's warning and drew his weapon. She fired without hesitation, the bullet striking his shoulder. He howled in pain, dropping his gun and clutching the wound. The gunshot startled the horses. Samson reared, nearly overturning the wagon. Willow struggled to maintain her aim while keeping the rifle from disturbing the twins, who had awakened and begun wailing in terror. Nathan seized the moment of confusion to gain control of Bryce's pistol. He pressed it against the man's temple, breathing hard. "Call off your friend, now!" Bryce, blood streaming from his split lip, glared up at Nathan. "Lester, stand down!" Lester, hunched over his bleeding shoulder, cursed, but made no further moves toward his weapon. "Here's what's going to happen," Nathan said, his voice deadly calm. "You're going to return to Prescott and tell him the Widow Garrett died of fever on the trail. Her babies, too. Tell him I buried them and there's nothing left for him to claim." "He won't believe that," Bryce spat. "Make him believe it." Nathan pressed the gun harder against the man's head. "Because if he sends anyone else after us, I'll know who to thank." He stood slowly, keeping the pistol trained on Bryce. "Get up. Take your friend and go." Bryce climbed to his feet, hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over, Keller." "It is if you want to live," Nathan replied coldly. "Now go." The men retreated, Lester leaning heavily on Bryce as they staggered away. Nathan kept the pistol ready until they disappeared around a corner, then quickly returned to the wagon. "Are you all right?" he asked Willow urgently. She nodded, though her hands trembled as she lowered the rifle. "The twins are just frightened." Nathan secured Bryce's pistol in his belt, then climbed up to take the reins. "We need to leave, now. They might have friends in town." They traveled hard for the rest of the day and through the night, stopping only when necessary to tend to the twins. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and Bitter Springs, but Nathan remained vigilant, frequently checking their back trail for pursuers. When they finally stopped to make camp near a rocky outcropping that offered some protection, Willow was exhausted. The twins, sensing her distress, had been fussy throughout the journey. Nathan helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering supportively at her waist longer than necessary. "You should rest. I'll take care of the horses and keep watch." Willow shook her head. "We need to talk first." They sat side by side on a fallen log while the twins, finally settled, dozed in their basket nearby. "You could have turned us in," Willow said quietly. $700 is a fortune." Nathan stared into the distance. "It wouldn't have been right. You fought for us. You could have been killed." "I've been in worse scrapes," he said dismissively. Willow placed her hand on his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Nathan covered her hand with his own. "You don't owe me anything." Their eyes held for a long moment. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of the bond that had formed during their journey, stronger than either had anticipated. Willow was the first to look away, suddenly conscious of the warmth spreading through her at his touch. It had been so long since she'd felt anything beyond fear and grief that the flutter of attraction caught her by surprise. "I should check on the twins," she murmured, withdrawing her hand. Nathan watched her go, conflicting emotions churning within him. He had started this journey out of a sense of justice, then continued it out of duty. But somewhere along the trail, duty had transformed into something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years, if ever. The next morning dawned clear and cool. They resumed their journey in companionable silence, both aware of the subtle shift in their relationship, but uncertain how to address it. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled west, the harsh desert giving way to grasslands dotted with stands of pine and oak. 5 days after the confrontation in Bitter Springs, they reached the California border. The Sierra Nevada mountains rose majestically in the distance, promising the end of their long journey. "Another week, perhaps less," Nathan estimated as they made camp that evening, "depending on the mountain passes." Willow nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and something else, regret perhaps. She busied herself preparing a simple stew from rabbit Nathan had snared earlier. "Have you thought about what you'll do after?" she asked, not looking up from the cooking pot. Nathan poked at the campfire. "Return to Arizona, I suppose. Fine work." "Bounty hunting?" "It's what I know." He hesitated. "Though I've been thinking it might be time for a change." Willow glanced up at this. "What kind of change?" Nathan shrugged uncomfortably. "I've saved enough for a small spread, somewhere quiet, maybe Colorado." "That sounds nice," Willow said softly. "Peaceful." "It does." Nathan watched as she stirred the stew. Her movements graceful despite her weariness. "What about you? Will you stay with your cousin?" "For a while." Willow checked on the twins, who were contentedly chewing on wooden spoons nearby. "Until I can establish myself somehow. I don't want to be a burden." "You could never be a burden," Nathan said with unexpected fervor. Their eyes met across the fire, and this time, neither looked away. The connection between them had grown stronger with each passing day, each shared hardship, each quiet conversation, each moment spent caring for the twins together. That night, after the twins were asleep and the fire had burned down to embers, Nathan found himself unable to rest. The knowledge that their journey was nearly complete filled him with an unfamiliar sense of loss. Soon, Willow and the twins would be safely delivered to her cousin, and he would continue on alone, as he had for 15 years. The thought was suddenly unbearable. He rose silently and walked a short distance from camp, needing space to think. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the vast expanse of sky. Nathan had always appreciated the solitude of his life, the freedom to go where he pleased without answering to anyone. But now that solitude felt empty, hollow. Nathan. He turned to find Willow approaching, wrapped in a blanket against the night chill. You should be sleeping, he said gently. So should you. She came to stand beside him, her face tilted up to the stars. It's beautiful here. It is. But Nathan wasn't looking at the stars. Willow lowered her gaze to meet his. I've been thinking about what happens when we reach Sacramento. Have you? His heart beat faster despite his effort to remain calm. I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, she began. You've risked your life, given up a substantial bounty. I didn't do it for gratitude, Nathan interrupted. I know. Willow took a deep breath. I think perhaps you did it for the same reason I find myself dreading the end of our journey. Nathan stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in her gray eyes. And what reason is that? Instead of answering, Willow reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his cheekbone with tender curiosity. Nathan remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe as she explored the contours of his face. I never expected to feel this way again, she whispered. After Thomas died, I thought that part of me died too. Nathan covered her hand with his own, pressing it more firmly against his cheek. Willow. The sound of her name on his lips broke something loose within her. With a small sound that was half sob, half laughter, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a statement. But when Nathan's arms came around her, drawing her closer, it deepened into something more certain. All the unspoken feelings of the past weeks, the gradual trust, the growing admiration, the quiet moments of connection, culminated in this single perfect moment beneath the stars. When they finally parted, Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. I've wanted to do that for a while now, he admitted. Willow smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Why didn't you? I didn't think. He hesitated, struggling to articulate thoughts he'd barely allowed himself to acknowledge. You're still grieving Thomas. And I'm not the kind of man a woman like you deserves. You're exactly the kind of man I need, Willow countered, her hands framing his face. Strong, honorable, kind. The way you are with the twins, her voice caught. They adore you already. The thought of the babies, their innocent trust, their vulnerability, sobered Nathan. What are you saying, Willow? She took a step back, gathering her courage. I'm saying I don't want you to leave when we reach Sacramento. Hope flared in Nathan's chest, but caution tempered it. What would I do there? Whatever you want. Willow reached for his hands, entwining their fingers. Farm, ranch, build. But do it with us. Nathan stared at their joined hands, hardly daring to believe what she was offering. Are you sure? It's been a difficult journey. Emotions run high in such circumstances. Nathan. Willow's tone stopped his protests. I know my heart. I know what I want. The question is, what do you want? He looked into her eyes, so full of hope and fearless honesty, and knew there was only one answer he could give. You, he said simply. You and the twins. A family. A home. The smile that illuminated Willow's face was like sunrise after the longest night. She stepped back into his embrace, and this time, when they kissed, it held the promise of 1,000 more, to follow each one a building block in the life they would create together. The remainder of their journey passed in a golden haze of newfound joy. Though Nathan remained vigilant for any sign of pursuit, they encountered no further trouble. The twins seemed to sense the change in atmosphere, becoming even more attached to Nathan, reaching for him whenever he was near. When they finally crested the last hill and saw Sacramento spread before them in the valley below, Willow felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief that they had reached safety at last, apprehension about how her cousin would receive them, especially with the addition of Nathan to their party. Her fears proved groundless. Cousin Martha, a sturdy widow of 50 with a prosperous farm and warm heart, welcomed them all with open arms. Though initially surprised by Nathan's presence, She quickly assessed the situation with shrewd eyes and made it clear that any man who had protected Willow and the twins across 1,000 miles of dangerous country was welcome in her home. "You'll stay the winter," she declared over dinner that first evening. "All of you. Then come spring, we'll see about finding you a place of your own nearby." Nathan glanced at Willow, who nodded encouragingly. "That's very generous, Mrs. Reynolds." "Martha," she corrected firmly. "We're family now, or soon will be if I'm reading the signs right." Her directness made Willow blush and Nathan clear his throat uncomfortably, but her approval was evident in her smile. That night, as Willow settled the twins in the small bedroom Martha had prepared for them, Nathan stood in the doorway watching. James was already asleep, but Eliza stubbornly fought against slumber, her tiny fists waving in protest. "She has your spirit," Nathan observed quietly. Willow looked up with a smile. Poor child. Nathan crossed the room to kneel beside her, gently catching one of Eliza's flailing hands. The baby immediately gripped his finger, her expression solemn as she studied his face. "I think she's making sure I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Are you?" Willow asked, the question casual but her eyes intent. Nathan lifted Eliza's tiny hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her delicate knuckles. "Not a chance. You're stuck with me now, all three of you." Eliza seemed satisfied with this answer, her eyes finally drifting closed. Nathan carefully extricated his finger and stood, drawing Willow up with him. In the soft lamp light, with the twins sleeping peacefully between them, he made a silent vow to protect this newfound family with everything he had. "I love you," he said, the words coming easily now that he'd accepted the truth of them. "I think I started falling in love with you that first day in the barn, when I saw how fiercely you protected your children." Willow leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "And I love you, for seeing us as people worth saving, not burdens or obstacles." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "For becoming the father my children need." "I'd like to make it official," Nathan said, surprising himself with the words, even as he spoke them. "If you'll have me." Willow's breath caught. "Are you proposing, Nathan Keller?" "Inelegantly," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But sincerely." Her answer was in the kiss she pressed to his lips, gentle but full of promise. They were married 2 weeks later in Martha's parlor, with the twins dressed in new clothes Martha had sewn for the occasion. James slept through most of the ceremony, but Eliza watched wide-eyed, as if understanding the significance of the moment. By spring, they had purchased a small ranch of their own just 3 miles from Martha's farm. The land was fertile, with a sturdy cabin and good water access. Nathan, drawing on skills learned in his youth, proved adept at farming and animal husbandry. Willow established a thriving garden and began selling preserves and baked goods in town, her culinary skills quickly earning a reputation. As the twins grew from infants to toddlers, their distinct personalities emerged more clearly. James was thoughtful and methodical, content to spend hours examining a single leaf or stone. Eliza was bold and curious, always the first to try something new. Both children adored Nathan, following him around the farm like devoted shadows, absorbing his lessons on everything from horse care to weather prediction. Nathan took to fatherhood as naturally as if he'd been born to it. His patience seemed endless, his rough hands gentle as he bandaged scraped knees or built elaborate wooden toys. In the evenings, he would sit on the porch with a child on each knee, telling stories of his travels across the West, carefully edited for young ears, of course. On the twins' second birthday, as they celebrated with Martha and a few neighbors who had become friends, Nathan pulled Willow aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to the oak tree that shaded their yard. From his pocket he withdrew a small leather pouch. "I've been saving this for the right moment." Curious, Willow opened the pouch. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When she pressed the tiny clasp, it opened to reveal miniature portraits of the twins, painted with remarkable skill. "Nathan," she breathed, tears filling her eyes, "it's beautiful. But how? I sent their descriptions to an artist in San Francisco, he explained. It took 3 attempts before he got it right. Willow threw her arms around his neck. I love it. Thank you. As he fastened the chain around her neck, Nathan's fingers lingered on the nape of her neck. I have more news, he said quietly. I received word yesterday. Harrison Prescott is dead. Willow stilled. What happened? Shot in a dispute over land rights. Nathan's expression was solemn. His brother-in-law has apparently fled the territory with most of Prescott's money. There's talk of reopening investigations into several suspicious dealings. Including Thomas's murder? Nathan nodded. It's possible. If you wanted to return and reclaim the land. No, Willow said firmly, her hand covering the locket at her throat. Our life is here now. Our home. She looked over to where the twins were gleefully smashing pieces of cake in their chubby hands. Let the past remain in the past. Nathan followed her gaze, his heart full at the sight of their children's joy. Are you happy, Willow? Truly. She turned back to him, her eyes clear and bright in the afternoon sun. Happier than I ever thought possible. She laid a hand on her stomach, still flat but holding a secret they had only just confirmed. Especially now. Nathan's eyes widened as he understood her meaning. You're sure? Willow nodded, her smile radiant. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. In about 7 months, the twins will have a little brother or sister. With a whoop of joy that startled the birthday guests, Nathan lifted Willow off her feet, spinning her in a circle as she laughed. When he set her down, he cradled her face in his hands with reverent tenderness. Thank you, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. For what? For trusting me that day in the barn, for giving me a family, a purpose. He kissed her softly. For making me the luckiest man alive. From across the yard, Eliza spotted them and broke away from the party, running toward them with arms outstretched. James followed more slowly, methodical even in his enthusiasm. Nathan crouched down, opening his arms to receive them both. As Willow watched her husband with their children, she remembered his words from that first day, "Seems they've claimed you already," and marveled at how prophetic they had been. The twins had indeed claimed Nathan, just as he had claimed all of them, creating a bond that would last a lifetime. And as the autumn sun warmed their little family beneath the spreading oak, Willow knew with absolute certainty that the long, dangerous journey from Arizona had led them exactly where they were meant to be, home.